Hey guys, Jason Stallworth here with Meadow Mastermind. We are kicking off a new and exciting series on metal mixing, and we're diving deep into some EQ hacks that's going to save you a lot of time and frustration when it comes to nailing down those mixes and all the little intricacies involved. We're going to simplify the whole process for you. Now, for this series, we have brought on our very own Nic Z. Most of you know Nick, you've worked with him, so he's the owner of Ramada Face Studios. He's also the creator of Metal Producer Overlord. Many of you have taken that course already. He also does some one-on-ones here at Metal Mastermind. More about that at the end of this video, but let's get started with part one. Nick is going to go over the basics and just break everything down about basic EQ on the overall mix and individual tracks.
Hey everybody, Nic Z here from Ramada Face Studios in beautiful Springfield, Massachusetts. As always, we're going to do some EQ hacks. Jason did us up a nice little ditty, so let's get right to it. Jay recorded for us. We have rhythm guitar left, rhythm guitar right, and a lead, and a bass, and this drum that he did with Easy Drummer, which is just a print of that MIDI. And I didn't do anything to this. I just imported these. I had these panned to set up an initial balance, but I just unpanned them. It's whatever. I just colored them to make sure that they are what they are, and then I put a 2-bus on the whole thing, which you could use your master bus for this, but I hate doing that because I have other stuff that I have to put on the master bus, like Metric AB or Rheostream, and I usually have Sonar Works on here, and I also have a loudness meter. I use the Ulean loudness meter on here as well, for those kinds of things, for meters and things like that. Like for my actual processing of my master bus, I just put it in the session as a 2-bus, and it's just the top of my session. If you've done any of the Metal Producer Overlord series over at Metal Mastermind, you know my template, you know how I get down. But this is what I do. I just start with a 2-bus and bring everything in under it, and it's essentially bussing everything in by making it a folder track. So there, that's out of the way. Good. Let's move on. The first hack that we're going to talk about is going back to roots. And whether you're new to EQing or you've been EQing for a really long time and you're just struggling with it, whatever the case may be, you're watching this video probably for some insight. So I'm going to try to help you out. So if you're struggling, what I do or what I did when I was struggling really bad with EQ, and the best thing that I found to do is to go back as much as you can, and basically to zoom out as much as you can. So I used to get into situations when I was new, or not even when I was new, when I was pretty advanced, when I was taking paying clients and stuff like that, where I just couldn't figure out what the hell was going on, and I had moved myself so small, I was looking at such a small thing that I kind of lost the big picture. And what I mean by that is this. So I'm going to just collapse the 2-bus here so that we're just using the 2-bus. What I mean by that is that everyone has EQ'd. Everyone well, not everyone. Most people have EQ'd. Like if you've ever been on, anyone who's interested in audio is EQ'd. Anyone who's been in the front seat of the car has and got to play with the stereo has EQ'd. Playing with the stereo bands, and it's essentially the same thing, just on smaller and smaller levels and in tighter and tighter increments, and that's what I'm talking about. And so if you're new to EQ or you're curious about it, you're curious about how you should get down, this is the first thing that I would do, and I would start with the whole song. So let's get the whole song. I don't have a balance of this yet. Let me balance this out real quick. And when I do my first balance, usually I'm moving way too fast for it, but usually I try to use like round numbers, if that makes sense, and I'll show you what I mean. So let's balance this out here. All right, so I just turned this down a little bit. I don't really need a whole lot of headroom because we're not mixing. And if I do, I can pull these down. We have 5 faders or whatever. But so when I pulled this down, I pulled it down by 1.25, not by 1.7654321 or whatever the case may be. Like later, those real numbers go away. But in the beginning, I want to keep it as tight as I can when I'm balancing. You know what I mean? And something about that is very right to me. So there's the drums. Let's bring in the guitars here. Should probably pan them first, considering they're left and right. And that sounds pretty good. And like I said, 136. Let's go in increments of 5. So negative 1.35. So there we go. Let's bring in the bass. That's fine for now. So negative 7.5. And he also gave us a lead. That sounds good about there. So let's do negative 1.5. Good. So great. So here's our rough balance. Groovy. And I just moved this down a little bit, the master fader, because I don't want it clipping on my clipping going to you guys, but whatever. All right, so there we are. So back to what I was saying now. So now we have a rough balance. We have a song, basically. So the first thing that I'm going to do in EQ, or rather in the context of EQ, is this. And I'm just using RIA EQ because it comes with Reaper, which is what I use for a DAW most of the time. And I set this up, and it looks a little lopsided, but hear me out on this. So in this space, with this EQ, with the very first EQ, I have 4 moves that I can make. I turn this up or turn it down, and this is a shelf. I can turn this up and down, or I can turn this up and down, right? So I can make it make the highs louder, or make the lows louder, or make them quieter and quieter, respectively, in the same way. So let's listen to this piece and see what we think we need in a macro view, in a zoomed out view. All right, so that sounds closer to me to what a tune is actually supposed to sound like, this little boost. And what are we doing? A nice round number of 3 dB. And we're just bringing the shelf up by 3 dB. And that's it. That's it. And I've EQ'd the song. You know what I mean? That's my first thing that I have to do to understand EQ, is understand this little move. You know what I mean? And you could do this with literally any song. Grab an EQ and just start moving it around. Just these 2 bands. Like, and for example, let's say that, this song was too bright. It needed to be a little darker. So move it up, call it a day. That's it. And almost by the same amount. You know what I mean? And we have a darker version of the song. If that's what you like, great. If that's how you think it should sound, great. And that's the beginning of EQ. Just doing those moves. All right? Easy peasy. Leave it alone. Leave it there. And do it on the song itself. Don't try to go to individual tracks. Just go to the whole song and try that out. See how it works. And when you've kind of, when you're comfortable with that, when you can do that, try this. So this is 3 bands now. And this is just a shelf going up and down. I'm sorry, I didn't make this into a shelf, which I should. This is a low shelf. Is this a high shelf? Yeah, it's a high shelf. And then this is just, for our purposes, it's just a bell. Okay? So it's a shelf going up and down in the lows, in the highs, and a bell in the mids. And that's it. And this is the equivalent of a car stereo EQ. Okay? So, again, we've all done this. We've all sat in a car and messed with it until we liked it. So let's tweak it now in a car stereo EQ and see how it sounds. Sounds pretty good to me. Just like that. And just like that, I've EQ'd the piece. You know what I mean? And I'm starting big. I'm starting with the whole piece of music. I'm not moving on to tracks, which I'm about to do. But once you get that down, then the thing to do is to move it. Reset this. Move it onto your tracks. So, Jay was nice enough to give us like these one stem and then the rest are multis, but they're, EQ'd pretty well, so they're almost stems. So, I'm going to bust this out, these 2 tracks, because they're just guitars left and right. So, I'm going to put them on a bus. That way, it's more of like a top-down view, a macro view. So, this is my guitars. And I'm going to keep this separate. Or I'm going to keep the lead separate, rather, because it's going to be processed differently than these. But let's move on. So let's move this EQ, which is a 3-band, the car radio EQ, down onto every track. And see if we can't get this balance sounding more like a song with just this 3-band EQ. So let's start with the drums. And I'm in solo on the drums because... yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be in solo all the time, and I don't recommend that you do, but every once in a while, if you want to hear something or fix something, it's the way to do it. And if you're using this as a starting point, then you got to start somewhere, right? So again, let's go to the drums. That's it. My drums are EQ'd now. That's pretty good. For my taste, for what I like, that's... use a little more high, so we gave him a little more high. But there it is. My drums are EQ'd. And I'm doing it on a stem. I'm doing it on a drum stem. I'm not doing it on every individual instrument on the drum because I don't need to. You know what I mean? Not right now. Later on, yeah. But that's what I mean by zooming out, is that like once you get good at EQing a drum itself, or a drum kit itself, then start to zoom in. Does that make sense? Like instead of starting with like I have, all right, kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, blah blah blah. You got 15 mics of drums to EQ, and you're just sitting there scratching your head, going, "Holy shit, what do I do with this?" You know what I mean? Like I just want to make it sound good. Get a balance of them together. Balance them up so like you know what a drum kit sounds like. You know what a drummer playing sounds like. Balance it so that you like it, and then put an EQ on the whole thing and make this macro move, this big move. All right, and see if that works. See if it's helping you. If it's helping you, obviously. Let's go to guitars, and I'm going to keep the drums on now. That already sounds good. That already sounds like... I mean, maybe it's a little loud, but that sounds like something. You know what I mean? Let's do the bass. All right, so when I brought up the lows, it sounds more to like how I like it. But those other bands really weren't doing anything to my ear. Like they weren't, making it better or worse. So I just left them alone because that's all we're using right now, and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm only going to worry about what we're worrying about. So, again, sounds pretty good. Let's do the lead. Cool. That sounds good. Let's rebalance, see where we're at. This is clipping a little bit, so let's bring it down. -4. Let's try that. Still a little over. 5. Whatever, I'm not going to worry about 0.5. That's fine. Cool. Where's this at? Negative, right on the button. -280. Let's bring the bass up. So without EQ, and with. And that's it. That's one way to start learning to EQ, one way to practice this, one hack that you can do. And it's important to point out that while I was doing this, I really wasn't listening in the context of other instruments. But we're going to get to that in a second. I was just kind of listening to the instruments themselves and seeing what they lacked, what they needed, because we're doing huge, broad strokes, right? And when you're doing huge, broad strokes, you can't really be a surgeon. You can't be that meticulous with your EQ. You can only do what I did, which is to kind of decide what you think sounds good and then recontextualize it by rebalancing the mix. But normally you wouldn't do that. But, you know, maybe you do. Maybe you like to work like that. Maybe that's your workflow. Like I do that all the time. Like I'll EQ something in context with the whole mix blazing. You know what I mean? And I'll notice that like I've made the snare brighter, but I haven't messed with the gain, so I have to turn it down. Happens all the time. Like I'm not really worried about it. Usually I don't have to redo the entire thing though, but I'm using Re-EQ, which full disclosure, I don't use Re-EQ very much. I use Pro Q3, which is just what I'm used to. And it has an auto gain feature on it, but it doesn't really matter. All right. So we did that, and that's step one, is to do the 2-band, and once you've mastered the 2-band, move on to the 3-band car stereo EQ.
Guys, if this video helped you, please give it a thumbs up, and if you enjoyed Nic's teaching style and his approach, the way he simplifies things, Nic has an entire course where he goes through the complete process of mixing for multiple subgenres of metal. It's called Metal Producer Overlord. There's a link for that course in the description of this video. Nic also does one-on-one consultations, so if that's something that you're interested in, we'll have a link to that in the description as well. And we'll also have links to all of the videos in this series here, in the EQ Hack series. We'll have that in the description of this video, so do check that out. And thank you so much for being a part of Metal Mastermind. We appreciate you. As always, create your own sound.